So how do HTML, CSS, and JavaScript all fit together? Well, before diving into JavaScript programming, you need to know how it'll fit together with HTML and CSS in your web pages. Web developers usually talk about three languages that are used to create web pages. Those include HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Whenever possible, try to keep the three languages in separate files, with the HTML file linking out to the CSS and JavaScript files. Each language forms a separate layer with a different purpose. So each layer, from left to right, builds upon the previous one. We start off with the HTML, which is the content of the page. The HTML gives the page structure and adds semantics. Then we layer on the CSS. The CSS enhances the HTML page with rules that state how the HTML content is presented. This will include things like backgrounds, borders, box dimensions, colors, fonts, etc. And then finally, we add the behavior layer, or the JavaScript file. This is where we can change how the page behaves and add interactivity. We try to keep as much of the JavaScript as possible in a separate file, although sometimes in this class we'll embed the JavaScript just because it's easier for the demonstration purposes. We'll talk more extensively about why you would want to keep the JavaScript in a separate file or embed it onto your page. When you build a website, these three layers, they form the basis of a popular approach to website building called progressive enhancement. As more and more devices become readily available on the market, this concept is more widely adopted. And it's not just screen sizes that vary, it's also connection speeds and capabilities of the devices. All of these things can differ. Just as some people browse with JavaScript turned off, you'll need to make sure that your pages still work for them. Now, that is a very small portion of the population, but we want to try to make our web pages as accessible as possible. So what this means is you want to start off with the HTML layer. Again, this contains the content. You want to focus on the most important things about your site and its content. This is just a plain layer. It should work on all kinds of devices and be accessible to all users. It should also load very quickly on slow connections. Then we add on or layer on the CSS. The CSS rules will control how the page looks. Commonly, you'll put the CSS in a separate file, and this makes making design changes to your site very easy because you just have one file to maintain, and it can control endless amounts of pages as long as they're all linked to that CSS file. It is possible to have your HTML page linked to multiple CSS files, and so you could create different style sheets that would make pages look different. And then finally the JavaScript, that's added last, and it enhances the usability of the page or the experience of how you can interact with the site. If you keep it separate, it means that the page will still work in case the user cannot load or run JavaScript. You could also reuse the code on several pages, making the site faster to load and easier to maintain. It works very similarly to the CSS. Let's take a look at a really basic web page. In this example, the HTML, the CSS, and the JavaScript are all on the exact same page. So this page is saved as an HTML file, but it does contain some very simple CSS styles here and a very simple script here. If we look at this page in the browser, this is what it looks like. And this is just a really simple example just to show you how we can use JavaScript. So if I click the button, you can see that an alert box pops up with the message that we specified. When I click OK, the alert box is going to go away. When we want to use JavaScript on our web page, we use the HTML script tag element to tell the browser that this is coming across a script. Because we're just embedding the script on the page, we just immediately go to entering our script. We'll talk more about the dynamics of the script in future lessons, but for now I just want you to know that the browser sees the script tag, knows that this is a script, and then is going to run whatever script it is that we've specified. Because all of our scripts are embedded, we don't have any other linked files. So this is all saved, as I mentioned, as an HTML file. In addition to this sort of JavaScript, which is embedded into the page, sometimes you'll see JavaScript that actually appears within the HTML. Let's look at an example of that as well. Here's a page that demonstrates inline script content. You can see here that I have the HTML on the page, and then within the body tag I actually have the script tag, so the script tag open and closes, and then I'm using the document write method, and I'm inserting an h3 tag with some text onto the page. Whatever new code that I insert between the opening script and the closing script tag is going to run and then display on the page. It's actually better not to mix JavaScript into the HTML pages like this, but I'm mentioning it here as you might come across this technique and I want you to be familiar with it. If we open the web browser and look at this page, it's just going to look like this. This is the new script generated content that's being created because of the script tag. As you may have guessed, the document.write method writes content into the document, which is the web page, and it's simply a way to add content onto the page. But as I said, this is not always the best solution. Later on in the course, we'll discuss other ways that you can update the content on a page. The other way that you may see JavaScript added onto your page is by linking to an external file. Here I've created a separate JavaScript file, and it just contains a simple function and some JavaScript. And then on my HTML page, I've inserted a script tag, and within the script tag, I'm using the source attribute to link to my external JavaScript file. I'm also using the type attribute to set the type to text JavaScript. This isn't necessary in HTML5 documents, but is recommended for older document types. So sometimes you may see the type set to text JavaScript. If you're using an HTML5 document, like I am here, it actually doesn't hurt to put this in, but it's not necessary for the newer HTML5 documents. Needless to say, you can see how the script tag is very concise, and that's because all of the script actually resides in that separate document. If we look at this web page in the browser, here's what the web page looks like, and when I click the button right here, you're going to notice that this initial text is going to change. Now it says new text. So you can see that as a result of clicking the button, we're actually changing content that appears on the page. Sometimes you'll find the JavaScript in the head portion of your web page, and sometimes you'll see it down at the bottom of the web page right before the closing body tag. Both methods work, but it's often considered a better place to put your scripts at the bottom of your page. Now that does depend on what's happening with your page, and again, we'll be talking more about the pros and cons of where to place your script as we progress through this course. So now you're familiar with the various ways that you can incorporate JavaScript into your file. You can embed the JavaScript into the head tag. You can create inline JavaScript and actually place it within your HTML, or you can link to an external JavaScript file.